So Grayson, what are some key trends and stats that really stood out to you comparing the annual threat report to the mid-year threat report?
Yeah, well, there's actually a number of stats, I should say, that really jumped out at me. And when we look at malware specifically, one of the numbers that jumped up quite a bit over the last year is how unique malware is when it ends up infecting your endpoint. And this is a rate that we kind of track as like the polymorphic rate for malware, where we see, when you encounter a threat, how many of our other customers have seen that exact threat. And what we saw so far in 2019 is that number has climbed all the way up to 95%, whereas in the previous few years it's roughly been about 90%. And really what this just shows is that malware authors know that discovery of their threats is really critical to being able to defend against them. And they've developed tools that allow them to really rapidly deliver threats and new variants to each new endpoint, making the job of discovery much more difficult. But what's also interesting is that if we look at that other 5% that's actually seen on more than one PC, it's really not a lot more than one PC. Of that 5%, about 3.8% is seen on 2 to 10 PCs, and then like less than 1% on more than 10 PCs. Since about 2015, there's been a decline across the board. Windows 10 has made a really big improvement in overall Windows security, but Windows 7 so far this year has seen a really big increase.
So why would you say that cyber criminals are specifically targeting older operating systems?
Well, I think there's several reasons why they're targeting older operating systems, but the primary one is that older OSs are less likely to receive security updates and Windows updates that fix vulnerabilities that have been discovered. A couple years ago, there was the Eternal Blue outbreak, and that resulted in a worldwide ransomware outbreak that pretty much spread overnight. And what we found is that Windows 7 is particularly vulnerable to this, and to this day, there's nearly 1 million Windows 7 endpoints that basically have RDP open to the internet. We've also seen a very significant rise in the number of websites that host Windows-based exploits, particularly those targeting older operating systems like Windows 7. And so, those two things really have resulted in that 70+% increase in Windows 7 infections so far this year.